Hi, folks. I'm going to share my sermon for the day. The readings are from Romans 7:15 to the first part of verse 25. Don't read the whole of 25 because you're going to end on a sad note. You're going to have to keep on reading a bit more. And the gospel reading is Matthew 11:16 to 19, and then 25 to 30. Sometimes the scripture that's been chosen for the Sunday leaves bits out because we're wanting to focus on bits of the scripture that encourage people in their faith. If we're doing Bible study, we would still read all of that. If we were discussing the scripture, we'd still read all of that. This is just what we're focusing on because we're wanting to preach the gospel in our church service. So have a read of those and then come back to the video. I grew up in church and got the impression that if I did all of the right things, if I tried hard enough, I could do all the right things and be a good person. If I worked really hard, I could make sure that I didn't think any bad thoughts or say any bad words or do any bad deeds. And I learned a really big list of bad deeds. But what Paul says in his letter to the ancient Roman church is that it's in our nature to do the things that we don't intend to do. We need God's help. I appreciate that for Christians, Jesus makes it really simple. Love God and love your neighbor as you love yourself. Treat others the way that you'd like to be treated. We don't necessarily need to have a lot of rules. But even then, we find those things hard. When Jesus describes humanity, he talks about a group of children who are playing music and no one will dance with them. And then when they cry in disappointment and because they've been rejected, nobody will comfort them or cry with them either. Our hearts are closed, whatever emotions are presented to us. Being present to others' feelings can be hard at the best of times, let alone during the World Cup when you've just lost 2 games in a row. It can be hard to celebrate with Egypt when they've just beaten us. And it can be hard when their coach uses the win as an opportunity to point the world's attention to the suffering and grieving of their neighbors in Palestine. It can be hard for us to be present to the suffering of our Jewish and Muslim neighbors and our migrant neighbors when they tell us about the aggression that they're experiencing from other people. We might find the same thing when Aboriginal people tell us that the national holiday is a day of grieving for them. It can be hard for us to open our hearts to that. We feel like we don't want to focus on negativity on the national holiday. Today's the beginning of NAIDOC Week, a day to celebrate Black excellence. I hope it's easier for us to join in and celebrate achievements of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, to join in the music and the dancing and the celebration. But if we're finding it hard to connect with our neighbour's grief or with our neighbour's celebration, I think we need to remember that we've probably all known that experience of being alone in grief or having our celebrations neglected. It can be hard for us to be open to others. It can be hard to be present in love with others in whatever they're experiencing, whether it's celebration or grief. Jesus says that people didn't appreciate his guru, his teacher, John the Baptist, because of the strict rules that John followed. John separated himself from the evils of society. He lived out in the wild. He lived a life of sobriety and fasting and prayer and holiness. And people didn't like it. They said, there's something wrong with that man. But when Jesus came along and he was part of society with people in their homes and streets and synagogues, eating and drinking at their parties with all kinds of people, people didn't like that either. People said he was unholy. So sometimes we don't like rules, but we don't want other people breaking the rules either. We don't want them celebrating or mourning with people that we don't think are worthy. We can have some complicated feelings about rules. If there are rules that we've always known, we might find that it's second nature to follow them, but we might also find that trying to follow a lot of new rules can exhaust and discourage us and make us anxious and make us grumpy towards other people. If we find that it's hard living by the rules that we've learned, we need to listen to what Paul says in his letter to the Roman church. We need God's help. And we need to listen to what Jesus says. Come to me and have a rest. The work that I have for you is light work, not a heavy burden. It's work we can relax into. If we can be relaxed, knowing that we're loved by Jesus, it might be easier for us to be open-hearted towards our neighbour when they invite us to celebrate with them. If we can rest and allow God to work through us, we might be able to respond with love when our neighbour asks us to be with them in their grief and tears.